Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from.
He woke up at 6:47 in the morning. The ceiling fan above him was turning slowly, casting soft shadows that rotated gently on the white ceiling. The sound was quiet but consistent, a low hum accompanied by the faint ticking of a clock somewhere nearby. Time felt tired this morning, as if it didn't want to move any faster. He lay still for a moment, not quite ready to start the day. His eyes slowly drifted over the room. He noticed a thin layer of dust that had settled on the fan blades. It was something he hadn't bothered to clean yet. Dust, he thought. It collects silently and steadily, like forgotten thoughts drifting in the back of the mind. On the wall hung a painting. It showed a distant mountain, a winding river, and a vague shape of clouds. He stared at it, but could not remember where it had come from or why it was there. The image was familiar, but also distant, like a half-forgotten dream. His gaze shifted slowly to the wooden dresser at the foot of the bed. The wood looked old but sturdy, with a faint scent of pine or maybe oak. He wasn't sure. It was the kind of furniture that had stories tucked inside its grains. Today, something inside him told him to open the drawer, not for clothes, but for the sock drawer. He got up from the bed, placing one foot on the floor, then the other. The wooden floor creaked under his weight, a soft, familiar sound. He moved deliberately, taking his time. There was no rush. He reached out and touched the handle of the drawer. It was cool metal, worn smooth by years of use. A small scratch marred its surface, and he traced it gently with his thumb, feeling the tiny indentation. He sat back in his chair for a moment, not to rest, but to reflect. There was something curious about socks. They lived close to the ground, experienced everything we stepped in, yet never said a word. Always hidden, always silent. He wondered, did they hold grudges? Did the left sock envy the right? Or were they simply content to serve? He reached into the pile of single socks, his fingers brushing over fabric that felt familiar and foreign at the same time. One was navy with tiny yellow dots, the other a faded green with stretched out elastic. Neither had a partner. Or maybe they did, once. He wondered how many socks he'd thrown away in his life. How many had slipped behind the dryer, never to return. There was a sense of quiet tragedy in that. The idea of being discarded, not because you weren't useful, but because you were alone. He stood again and looked around the room, as if the missing socks might be hiding somewhere in plain sight. Under the bed, he knelt, lifting the edge of the comforter with theatrical slowness. Dust bunnies stared back. No socks. Still he reached under, sweeping his hand blindly. Something soft brushed his fingertips. A sock. Dusty, but intact. He pulled it out like a forgotten artifact. A triumphant smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was striped, purple and black. He remembered this one. A gift, maybe, from someone who liked quirky colors. He placed it gently on the singles pile, reuniting it with its kind. Even if its partner was long gone, it belonged here now, among the misfits, the almosts, and the maybes. He returned to the main stack. More pairs came together, some obvious, some debatable. He made choices, quiet ones. Did the texture matter more than the pattern? Was it better to pair by color or by spirit? There were socks that looked like they belonged together, but up close, their wear was different. One stretched, the other tight. One had a faded heel, the other a stronger cuff. They were technically a match, but emotionally distant. He separated them. The drawer now had several zones: pairs, singles, old but functional, and questionable matches. He labeled them in his mind. The pairs, confident, united. The singles, lost, resilient. The old but functional, weathered, loyal. The questionables, hopeful, but uncertain. He created a small space in the back of the drawer, not for socks, but for decisions that hadn't been made yet, the maybe zone. A soft place for socks that didn't quite fit anywhere. For now, that felt necessary. He paused again, stretching his back slowly. His bones made small crackling sounds. Outside, a breeze shifted the curtains slightly. Light moved gently across the room, changing the mood without altering anything. The act of organizing socks had become something more. A meditation, perhaps, a conversation with stillness. He had entered a quiet kind of flow where time passed unnoticed. He didn't check the clock. He didn't need to. Instead, he thought about how many things in life are like this. Piles we mean to sort, things we put off because they seem too small to matter. But here he was, an hour or more into an act that had no urgency, no reward, no applause, yet it felt oddly important. The drawer was nearly full now, a soft landscape of color and cotton, order and oddity. He picked up one last sock, black, thin, formal, the kind worn to meetings. He stared at it for a long while. He hadn't worn formal socks in ages. It felt like an artifact from a different life. Did he even need this one anymore? He placed it down, not in the drawer, not in the singles, not in the maybes, just beside him. And he breathed, not deeply, not dramatically, just enough.
He sat with the black sock by his side, letting the quiet settle in the room again. The drawer was now mostly filled, organized in a way that made sense to no one but him. Yet somehow, that made it feel even more right. He looked at the sock beside him. It wasn't part of the drawer anymore. It wasn't discarded either. It existed in a kind of limbo, a gentle pause between being and not being. He stared at it, not with judgment, but with curiosity. It was perfectly functional, no holes, no frays, a loyal sock, really. Yet it felt out of place, like it belonged to someone else now, someone he used to be. He tried to remember the last time he had worn it. Maybe it was at a wedding, or an interview, or a funeral. Funny how you never think about socks in those moments, but they're always there, hidden, reliable, quiet. He slowly leaned back into his chair, hands resting lightly on his thighs. He thought about the socks still in the wash, or hidden in luggage, or buried deep in couch cushions. They weren't lost. Not yet. Just delayed. There was something comforting about that. Not everything missing is gone forever. His eyes drifted to the window again. A cloud moved lazily across the sky. It had no destination, and it didn't need one. He sipped the last of his lukewarm tea and thought, maybe this is what peace looks like. Not a beach, not a sunset, not applause or celebration. Just a man, a drawer, and a sense of quiet completion. But he wasn't quite done. He stood once more, knees creaking gently, and opened a second drawer. This one wasn't for socks. It was deeper, less used. Inside, a tangled mass of scarves, gloves, and yes, more socks. He inhaled through his nose, slow and steady. Another drawer. Another chapter. He reached in and pulled out a scarf first, plaid, soft, slightly unraveling at the end. He remembered buying it, maybe 7 winters ago. Or maybe it was a gift. He wasn't sure. Either way, it had warmth. Not just physical warmth, but a memory kind of warmth. He folded it slowly and placed it aside. Then he dug deeper. More socks. Some thick, some wool, some with patterns that bordered on absurd. One had cartoon pizzas, another had tiny astronauts. These were the playful ones, the socks you wore not because you needed them, but because you could. He smiled faintly. There had been a time when those socks made him feel bold. Now they made him feel older. Not in a sad way, just aware. He began to sort them the same way. Texture, color, mood. One sock was fuzzy, the kind you wore during colds. He remembered sneezing, blankets, and soup. He held the sock like it was a piece of an old diary. Another was stiff, clearly shrunk in the wash. He tried to stretch it, but it had given up. He folded it anyway and placed it in the once useful pile. There was a pair he had worn on a road trip. He remembered the smell of gas stations, the feel of warm hair rushing through an open car window, the hum of tires on distant highways. Strange, he thought, how a sock can remind you of a horizon. As the second drawer began to form its own structure, he realized something. This wasn't about socks anymore. It never really was. This was about attention, about care, about spending time with things that didn't demand it. He had spent so much of life rushing, scrolling, swiping, moving from one obligation to the next, that he had forgotten the value of stillness, of folding something just because it's there, of honoring the forgotten things. A final sock rested in his hand. Bright yellow, slightly obnoxious, a color he wouldn't wear now, but once had, confidently. He didn't pair it. He didn't judge it. He simply folded it, placed it gently in the middle of the drawer, and closed it with quiet satisfaction. Then he stood back. The socks were done. 2 drawers. 1 morning. No music, no audience, no fanfare. Just silence, and a drawer that made sense again. He walked to the kitchen. The kettle, now cool, waited patiently. He filled it again. Boiled water. Chamomile.
3 stirs. And as the tea steeped, he stood in the doorway, looking back at the drawers, still closed, still calm, still complete. He carried the warm tea back to his chair, the one by the window, the one with the small dip where he always sat. The steam rose in a slow spiral, catching the light like a ghost learning to dance. He didn't sip yet, just held it, felt the warmth through the ceramic. The house was utterly still. No ticking clock, no hum of screens, no notifications, just him and the socks. 2 drawers, folded, organized, left alone to rest. He could have done laundry. He could have vacuumed the hallway. He could have gone online and typed something into a search bar, looking for things he already knew. But instead, he sat quietly. There's a unique kind of silence that only exists when you finished something that didn't need doing. A silence that asks nothing of you, not even pride. He let his thoughts slow to a crawl, not empty, just soft. He thought about all the things people measure: money, followers, steps, hours, likes, calories, goals. But no one measures sock drawers. And maybe that's the point. He thought of time, not as a ticking thing, but as a lake, still, deep, reflective. And this morning, organizing socks was like dropping a pebble into it, watching ripples go in all directions. No one else might notice, but he would, for days. He sipped the tea. It was just the right temperature now. He could taste the chamomile, lightly sweet, a little earthy, like dried flowers remembered by the wind. He placed the cup on the windowsill and looked out again. The same bird from before, or perhaps its cousin, was now perched on a wire. It didn't sing, just stared. A silent companion in the ceremony of doing nothing in particular. He watched it without expectation. Eventually, it flew away. He didn't follow it with his eyes. He just let it go. Because everything passes, even this. He stood once more, not to do anything, but to stretch. His back arched gently, arms raised. A yawn escaped, quiet and sincere. He walked into the hallway, then the bedroom. He opened the drawer again, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to see it one more time. Still folded, still calm, still a little perfect. He took a pair of socks from the old but functional group. Gray, cotton, slightly loose at the ankle. He sat on the bed, slowly pulled them over his feet, and patted them down. The fabric was soft, familiar. They weren't flashy, but they did their job. He stood up, walked to the front door, put on his shoes, and stepped outside. The day was still young, but already complete in some quiet, invisible way. He didn't have a checklist. He didn't need a goal. He had done one thing well. He had honored the drawer, and that was enough. The end.